Welcome back, I'm Rob Lang and this is my game Clomper. You live inside a mechanical ladybird called a Clomper, which you can control by laying pipes to power machines with steam. The outside world is a hellscape that you explore from inside the Clomper, picking up resources and completing quests. If that sounds like fun, like and subscribe for more. I had the idea for Clomper in July 2019. Since then I've been trying to answer the question, is it fun? Is it worth putting time into? 2 years and over 50 devlogs later, do I keep working on Clomper or do I shelve it and move on? Is it fun? I wanted to make a game to play with friends on a Sunday night. Our favourite games were co-op with building and exploration. I like the idea of building a base that you take with you. And we enjoyed starship simulators where every player has a distinct role like Artemis. So I wrote up my ideas on a private blog and asked, does this sound fun? I had a tentative, possibly. I listed all the features, ordered them by importance in Trello, and then cut until I had the smallest set that could prove if my game was fun, the minimum viable game. Of those, I chose to prototype 2 core gameplay features I didn't know how to do: pipe laying and networking. I bashed together some temporary dev art and followed tutorials to put Photon Pun 2 networking in. Get your networking in as early as possible because adding it later is hard, not just because networking is hard, but because you'll need to change the structure of your game to fit the networking framework. If you choose badly, then changing your networking library later is hard too, but we'll come back to that. The simplest pipe network is to have them flat on the floor in 2D, but Pete pointed out that having a pipe network like this could be great fun to untangle. I'm glad I listened to him, I usually am, and made the pipes lift into the 3rd dimension. I also didn't want the complexity of T-pipes at first, but was quickly corrected by my friends. In my first scene setup, the players ran around inside a Clomper that moved on the landscape. Although that modelled reality well, the physics became complex fast. It was Big Rob who suggested having the players in a separate space and the Clomper just as a proxy that roamed the world. I'm glad I switched to that solution, as networking players holding objects inside a moving space would have been incredibly hard and buggy. My original idea for Clomper locomotion was so complicated that just thinking about it drains away my life force. My friends pointed out at this stage everything should revolve around placing pipes, and my son Felix said that I should have legs I should power. Pipes power legs, and the more legs you power, the faster you go. Nice and simple. I was moving away from having separate crew stations and concentrating on laying pipes first. The original Hellscape was a purling noise spike vest. Kind of cool looking for a test, but collision was difficult and I wanted to use a mix of human designed spaces and a random world. Using raw maths to generate your landscape can make that mixture very hard. So I threw that away and created some prefab mountains with colliders that would spawn in using purling noise to clump them together. At this point I needed just enough random environment to give the rest of the prototype systems a chance, but it wouldn't satisfy my need to feel surprised by it. It would have to go eventually. At each point during this design and build, I'm doing the bare minimum to demonstrate how a feature might work and then move on to the next. The now familiar hex map and damage model were next. I was starting to be very proud of the game and the feedback was positive. It was the first moment when I felt that Clomper could be fun. This rather ugly stage might be familiar to many of you because this is where I was when I made my first devlog. My goal with devlogs has always been to get involved in the game dev community, but I didn't feel like I had anything to show before this point. That was probably a mistake. I could have started earlier, even if I was walking through my ignorance. Let's accelerate now. There are devlogs covering this stuff in detail. Check out the playlist in the comments. Introducing quests gave the players motivation. arriving in little tubes at the bottom of a new nerve station called the Con. Since then it's moved and had more dials added to it, but it's much the same idea. As you can see from the design, even in 2021 it's looking a little bare. I could just fill it with random dials, but I want each dial to be useful, to show something important in the game. It was painfully obvious by the end of 2019 that if I wanted to grow the YouTube channel and widen the feedback I get from viewers, then the game would need to look better. I know that this goes against the advice that you should keep the prototype simplistic, but I was trying to balance growing a channel and finishing a game. I decided to split my graphics updates into passes and perform my first one at the end of December 2020. I built new models for everything but the pipes. I used Blender image planes to map out the shape of the Clomper and built imposing boilers and animated legs. I'm still not 100% happy with the leg design, but they'll do for now. 4 months into game dev, and there's an important component missing: Steam. It took 20 minutes with VFX Graph, Bracky's tutorials and complete ignorance to get this far, and then another 8 minutes to get to here. I upgraded render pipeline from universal to high definition and it looked beautiful. The lighting on the Steam is gorgeous. Sadly, I couldn't keep using HDRP, but we'll come back to that. I have a fascination with claw machines. In a learning project I called Cloudship, I used a rope swinging claw for picking up scrap, and I wanted something similar in Clomper. I didn't implement the swinging as I felt that would be too hard given the claw was controlled by differential steam pressure. The original design of the claw would pick up objects, put them in a pot and then swing them out of the way. The pot physics and game logic was incredibly complicated and unreliable, so I said goodbye, having spent weeks trying to get it working. Goodbye, pot. My first pass at the grabbing handle worked, but didn't do all the things I needed it to, so that changed later. Valves arrived, giving players more control over the steam, and when scrap was collected, a little thermometer grew to show how much you had. Valve control needed the Steam algorithm to be upgraded from breadth first search to Dijkstra. Click the link in the top right if you like algorithms. By the end of February 2020, I was knee-deep in performance profiling, and although I smoothed out the spikes, I never achieved my 60 frames per second target. I merged materials and shaders, but didn't get much benefit. I'm still a bit disappointed by that, but I parked it for then. I poured March and April into a flurry of features: the Periscope for seeing the Hellscape outside and a lift for moving quest items into the Clomper. I jettisoned the pot, added a new claw handle with a new dial to show its position. The grinder wheeled into action next, turning scrap into resources, and a new quest type where you get to pick up a thing, take the thing to another place and then drop it on another thing. It's still the only quest available in the game, but I can think of many more types I'd like to make. By June 2020, it was time to start addressing bugs that I'd been largely ignoring while building features. I couldn't playtest with lots of large bugs in the game, as it's bad form to ask your friends to spend time testing something that's half-baked and broken. I rebuilt my rigid body character controller and fixed endless desync and ownership bugs. I definitely felt like I was in a development quagmire. To push through, I kept organised and focused on specific functionality. Performance is a feature, and I was only getting 30 frames per second on my modern PC. With feedback from the community, I replaced HDRP with URP. Frames per second went from 30 to 250. I still hold on to the idea that URP will get more beautiful as time goes on, so a future graphics pass will return it to beauty. Fortunately, you all agreed. I haven't tweaked those graphics since then, and URP has moved on, so I'm due another graphics pass. Then the migraines hit, and my brain became inoperable. I was off work, off hobbies, and a shadow laying in bed for my children to jump on. It was pretty miserable, but they passed eventually. With migraines gone, I threw myself into procedural world building at the end of August 2020. The world is now built out of tiles and assembled using wave function collapse. Although I hate that I've not returned to the world building since then, I'm very proud of the implementation and how it can be used across an infinite landscape. It's got 1980s aesthetics, but it works, so it can stay for now. As Evil Matt pointed out in the first playtest, only the person in the Periscope gets to see it, so it's really a big feature for one person. I agree, making it pretty now is too early. When I return to it, I will add features to the environment, not just to make it look nice. By the end of October 2020, it was done, and I've not needed to touch it since, which tells me I've got my abstractions and architecture right. My next big decision was what to do with the netcode. Until October 2020, I'd used Photon Pun 2, which uses a server for matchmaking, but I didn't need that. Clomper uses the idea of a player hosting and friends joining. So I took out Photon Pun 2 and started my relationship with Mirror, running straight into the limitations that it's had since UNet. It took me 6 months to replace the netcode. 6 months. Some of that 6 months was because it was over the lockdown winter, which was pretty grim in the UK. It was a struggle reworking just about everything and hitting Mirror limitations over and over. Not a struggle I particularly enjoyed. Let's return to the question that I'm trying to answer. Is it fun? By the end of April 2021, I was ready for my first playtest with friends. This was it, the big moment. I was writing this game to play with my friends. Was it actually fun? Would they enjoy it? After 21 months of struggle, early mornings, beard, no beard, beard again, no beard, beard again, more beard, this playtest would decide if Clomper was fun. If it wasn't, I'd stop. At the end of the playtest, I asked,
"Crashes aside, do you think that this could be fun?"
The silence was deafening. The answer, that came in the days that followed, was a cautious, possibly. The core feedback was that it needed more life. I couldn't get a definitive answer to my question, but I could get enough of an inkling to know that another playtest was worth the time. I could breathe life with sound, VFX and animations, but that would not solve the problem of there not being enough to do. I had 3 options: improve the environment, implement an inventory, or build heat management. It's easy to imagine what an inventory system or more interesting environment might be like, so I settled on the more difficult feature, heat management. Put yourself into my shoes in June 2021. The last feature I'd added was the procedural environment that was 8 months before. The netcode rewrite had taken it out of me, but I was delighted to get back into coding something new. The aim was for a second playtest, so I got cracking. I added sounds, movement, life in the Clomper, some of this. I also added the switch pipe, improved the dials, and let Steam give you a push. With those done and devlog 49 out, I approached my friends for another playtest. They kindly agreed. I was nervous. This was it. I couldn't keep stringing it out. I had 2 options. Either they would find the game fun, or I'd call it a day. Add some menus and release what I had for free on itch. I'd love to be able to play some playtest audio over this footage, but I messed up the levels in OBS. I watched as the team completed a quest, then spent a good chunk of time blowing things up and playing with fire sprites. Was it fun? Yes. The relief was palpable. It is fun. It needs more content and polish, and it's probably only a 2-player game, but it's a fun game. So what feature is coming next? At time of writing, I haven't decided. My options are an inventory system where you spend scrap to buy pipes and unlock new types with blueprints found in the wilderness. Or upgrade the environment, adding chasms, conveyors, steam jets and lava. What do you think I should work on first? Please let me know down in the comments. While I'm collating feedback, I'll be working on small features, which make new devlogs easier to pump out too. It's been 2 years. Through dark times fighting with multiplayer in Migraines, then joyous moments where I played with my son Felix and saw my friends have fun. Game dev is a rare gift where you take your imagination and allow others to wander around inside it. Inevitably, it's deeply personal and, if you get it right, hugely rewarding. Thank you all for your contribution, feedback, banter, patience and candour over the past 2 years. Let's see what's next. Until next time, bye bye.